Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Climate Confident Podcast. My name is Tom Raftery, and with me on the show today, I have my special guest, Brian. Brian, welcome to the podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Tom, I love to. I'm coming off a really great Memorial Day weekend, and so really excited to be here on this podcast. I am the CEO and co-founder of Aquaria, and I am building a company where we are unlocking a new and secure source of water supply for cities by harvesting thin air. And so our mission is to address, well, I think one of the largest problems we face today amidst climate change, which is access to clean water. So I'd love to talk more about this today and, share some information with our audience.
Great. Fantastic. When you say harvesting water from thin air, you mean just literally getting water out of the air and giving it to people to drink?
Yeah, literally out of thin air. I mean, I'm here in San Francisco, Tom, so I think many people that are around the Bay Area would see fog all over the place. But we know there's lots of water in the air, rain, fog, clouds, all of that is water. Even in areas with like less humidity, there's still lots of water in there, and we might not see it. And that's what our technology does, is making that into clean water for use in drinking, cooking, living, and other use cases. Exactly, out of thin air.
And how does it work?
So let's see, I can explain it a couple of ways, but actually the fundamental principles is quite simple and we all know it. So Tom, I'm sure you've had the experience in the summer, you take a glass of cold drink out of the fridge and then water droplets form on the side of the bottle, right?
Yep.
So actually that's a form of it. It's condensation. So the question is, how do we create condensation? How do we extract water out of the air in large volumes and using little energy? So
Hmm.
that's actually what our technology does, is we have created both active and passive cooling methods where we use special materials, we've created heat exchange and recovery systems and airflow design such that we're maximizing heat exchange and then we're able to extract large volumes of water. Again, that's our focus, is enough to power entire homes, communities, in the future cities with water from the sky.
Okay. What's the kind of genesis story for this, Brian? Because it's not something that, people tend to think about on a regular basis. I mean, most of us go to our taps, turn them on, and out comes water.
So when was the last time you thought about water, Tom?
When I went to the kitchen just before and filled up this container here for the podcast.
Right? So that's actually part of the problem. I think of course everyone drinks water every single day, but people aren't really thinking about water. That's actually part of the genesis behind this company. I used to be a venture capitalist, and then I was thinking about really contributing my time and spending my time as a founder of a climate company versus just investing in companies. And so I was thinking through like, okay, well, I want to dedicate myself to climate. I've been working on climate for quite a while, and I even did my, I guess college thesis on a climate related topic in energy and water. But as I'm sure there are lots of guests that have come on the Climate Confident podcast, there's lots of great entrepreneurs working on energy issues. But why are there not more people focusing on water? That's a huge, huge challenge. And that's what I want to do for Aquaria. That's what I want to do with Aquaria, is we want to provide a new way to bring water, clean source of water. And that's how I got started.
Okay. And where did the technology come from?
We created it. We created everything in-house. We built it over the past 4 years, and we have a great technology team. I'm technical myself, but we also have a fantastic CTO leading our team of researchers. So we spent a lot of time and effort building the technology over the past 4 years.
Great. And how does it work? I mean, I know you said it's like condensation on my beer glass as I'm sitting out on a sunny day, but talk to me more about it from kind of a practical perspective. If I am a homeowner in somewhere where there might be water insecurity, what's next?
Sure. More practically speaking, our product is kind of like maybe I'll use Tesla power packs as an example. They could be bigger, they could be smaller, they could be indoor, it could be outdoors. It just kind of depends on where you live and what type of home you have. Like Tom, do you have a balcony or do you have a garage? Like I don't know or you have an apartment. Like how does that work?
I've a house, so it's a detached house with front garden, back garden, side garden, etc.
Okay, perfect. So essentially, if someone had a home and a backyard, let's say, or front yard, we would be able to put a small box in front or behind the house, and then connect that box to your pipes, to your main water pipes. That way, when you're inside the home, when you turn on your tap water, or when you're taking a shower, you actually can't tell a difference that the water is coming from the sky. We put a storage tank behind your home, a small one or a large one, depending on that's up to you to decide how much water you want to store and that's how we're able to provide that water seamlessly. We have a separate version that's smaller indoors, and that one just functions like a well-designed water cooler. And it looks like an office water cooler, but it can produce up to 24 gallons or 100 liters of water a day just from the air. So it's dependent on your needs.
So you have something that looks like a water cooler, operates indoors, and can produce up to 100 liters of water a day.
Yes, that's right.
Wow. Because water coolers are what? What's in a water cooler? It's probably around 25 liters, maybe.
Likely the case. And so we have 100, and so probably enough for 20 to 30 people a day, maybe more, depending on where you're at. Schools, office building. I guess, or for your home if you're making soup.
And talk to me about the energy footprint of it then, because I know you said it needed to be energy efficient, but we know that heating and cooling, just looking at my fridge freezer in the kitchen there, it does have a significant energy footprint. What does this water, is it a water, what do we call it? It's not a water purifier. It's not really a water generator. What are we
Yeah, we
calling it?
call it an atmospheric water generator or air
Okay.
water generator.
Okay. So what's like the energy footprint of one of these air water generators?
Yeah. So let's take the indoor unit I just mentioned, for example. I assume that if you go to your local supermarket or buy your water, maybe a gallon, a couple liters of water, 25 cents, 50 cents, I think that's something like that. We think about our cost in terms of energy. So that unit is a 1.2 kilowatt appliance. And
Okay.
so each liter of water we're creating is likely around anywhere from 2 to 5 pennies of water in energy costs, and the appliance itself is 1.2 kilowatts. So you can run the system on solar off grid or your power on your power grid, and it has the footprint of an electric appliance at home.
Okay. And who is the target market for this? Because, look, like I said, when I got the water for the podcast, I went out to the tap in the kitchen and turned it on, and out came perfectly good water.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. The way we think about Aquaria is we're building a secure way to get water that is faster and more affordable. And the reason for that is if we think about water today, like Tom, that's fantastic. You have great water flowing out of your tap. I live in San Francisco, so we don't really have a tap water issue here either. But very close outside of San Francisco, there's lots of water disruption and contamination, along the coastlines of California and even just north of San Francisco. And it's really the case for many parts of the southern United States and, of course, many parts of the world. And in order to fix that, you have to build these large, expensive infrastructure. Whereas for us, you can place our units and start making water immediately. So that's really the value we offer. You mentioned water security before, is that we give you a way to control your water supply and make it immediately without having to spend a large sum of money and wait for those other methods to kind of come online.
Okay. And when you say immediately, how fast does it operate? How long does it take to get the first liter out or the 100th liter out? Or I know this probably depends on unit size as well, but does it have like a 5 or 10 minute warm up period before you get any out, or how immediate is immediate?
Oh yeah, it's let's give some ranges. So let's say for that indoor unit is actually so simple. You just plug it into the wall, it starts right away. So let's say on a not super humid day, and let's say it makes 50, 70, not 100 liters, right? So if you divide that up down to 24 hours in a day, you're making 2, 3 liters in the first hour, right?
Right.
First hour. So you literally get water immediately. And let's you take an outdoor unit that's a little larger, well, it would be the same thing. The moment that you're, of course, it will take a little bit longer to, install that machine in your backyard. But again, once that thing is installed, which would only take a couple of days, way, way, faster than even digging a well, again, 30 to 50 liters per an hour, probably, since it's a larger machine.
And the water coming out of it, I know if it's water that is after having been condensed, it's quite pure, but are you running it through filters to take out any contaminants, or is it just straight from the condensate?
Oh, we definitely have to purify it. In the air and also in the water once you've condensed it, when you created it, there's potential contaminants in there.
Mm,
So we run in our products, we actually have multi-stages of both air filtration like HEPA filters as well as water purification systems, ultrafiltration or activated charcoal, etc. So then we're running it through multiple stages of air and water purification, and then even once the water is created and it's sitting in the tank, we still run that through a UV disinfection process over time so that it continues to stay clean. Now, I think the last step will we will not probably, we skip if you're using the water to flush your toilet. You don't need that quality of water. But for
sure.
drinking, we do that.
Okay. Okay. And who's the target market? I mean, you've mentioned office buildings, you've mentioned homes, you've mentioned scaling up to cities at some point, but right now, who are you targeting it at?
Yeah, yeah. That's a great question, Tom. What I mentioned before are essentially our vision for Aquaria is building atmospheric water at the scale in the future for entire cities. And that's how we think about our customers is that essentially we are a water solution for buildings, starting with people, humans. We as humans need water the most. We as humans have the highest value on water for our lives. And so we want to start with protecting the security and the quality of human access to water first. So what that means is we're starting with homes, we're starting with communities. Actually, at the end of last year, we built, some of the first homes in the world whose water supply comes from air. This is in Texas. This is in Hawaii, in America, and now their water supply is solar powered. They have batteries, and the homeowners get water from the air. And then this year, we just signed a contract where we're now building out communities of 1,000 homes in Hawaii, and we're starting to scale up from there. And that's likely where we're going for the next, couple of years is really focused on building more and larger communities in areas that's facing water stress, and then giving these communities an option where we just attach our units, our technology on the homes, and then have another source of water.
Okay. So, in that community of 1,000 in Hawaii, is that a thousand individual units, or is it maybe 200 units split across 5 homes, or is it one unit split across 1,000 homes, or where does it fall in that spectrum?
Yeah, our initial plan is actually 1 unit per home. For this particular community we're building in Hawaii, we're actually thinking about having each home as an example of like an individual unit where the solar power and the batteries and the water is self-contained. But recently, actually, we came across some conversation around the idea of a microgrid, but for water,
Mm,
whereby we don't necessarily need individual, maybe we have a cluster of 5 to 10 homes, and then the water tank connects to all of them and then simply distributes the water as needed because not every home always have the same number of people there and the usage may vary. So, we're playing with those ideas. I'm really excited about some of those ideas.
Okay. And have you been in touch with the people in Flint, Michigan?
For Michigan, yes, that comes up a lot. Yes, we are speaking with some developers over there to, that's a very frequently mentioned place. And it's actually not just Flint though, Tom, Flint comes up top of mind, but there's lots of other places.
Okay. Where, so in kind of order of priorities, what are you prioritizing in terms of homes, communities, cities, in terms of your development?
Yeah, right now we're really interested in helping out us Texas and Mexico. Mexico City right now is heading towards a really crisis situation where they might run out of water in a month or two. I think the date they said is end of June if it doesn't rain. So we're really focused on how do we connect with builders and communities in Mexico City to implement our product. Texas is also facing lots of drought and having drought issues across the south and eastern Texas. I think those are two main areas right now for us. Although we're also expanding our team, so that's actually one of the areas we're focusing on is letting people know that hey, we're here to help provide a solution from Aquaria today, and if you have a water problem, perhaps we can help solve that for you today.
Okay, cool, cool. And what's the price point like? Because water is reasonably inexpensive in most regions. So how long will it take to get a savings on purchasing a device like this if I am a homeowner?
Yeah, so I guess Tom, do you know how much you spend? Do you drink tap water or do you drink like
Yeah.
packaged water?
Tap water.
Tap water.
Yeah.
And did you get a filter for that tap water or was it already just good quality?
No, it's just good quality.
Oh, okay. Well, then I guess that question doesn't really quite work. It's you already have great water to begin with. Let's see. Okay. So we will, so we actually have some of our units in offices. I think I use office because for a homeowner, I think the payback period is just simply dependent on how much water you drink. Like think about it, 100 liters, you can't drink that much water a day. So
No.
then the payback period would be dependent on how much water, how much money you're actually spending on water. And the more you're actually spending on water right now, the more that we can save you using our instead of buying packaged water instead. I think one of our investors actually save about $1,000 a month for the office because they used to get those big packaged, what do you call those? Like
Big
19-liter
drum.
jugs.
Right. The big
Those,
drums
yeah,
of water for
exactly.
the water coolers. Yeah. Okay.
E- Exactly. They save about $1,000 a month from us. And then for the bigger units, we're seeing that upwards of, 50,000 US dollars instead of digging a well, they're placing our system on site instead. So depending on which unit you purchase, again, we might be saving you a lot of costs up front by digging, instead of digging a well, or just very quickly instead of purchasing water bottles.
Okay. And is Aquaria the only company doing this? Because it sounds like the technology, from what you're telling me, is reasonably straightforward. You're just, you got a, a beer glass out there condensing water. Are there other companies doing this, or are you guys way out ahead, or where are you in that kind of competitive landscape?
Yeah. So making water from the air is not that hard. Like we
Mm.
just mentioned, a beer is making water from the air, or any cold surface is making water from the air. But it's very difficult to make water from the air in large volume and in an energy efficient way because that's where the secret sauce is how do you produce enough water to have a meaningful impact on our water needs and also taking into account of what power input and the availability of power to do that. So, that's where our technology focus on. We are not the only company to have come up with atmospheric water capture. There are a couple of other companies out there, and actually, I think there should be more. Some of those companies are also quite well funded by, technology and venture capital investors, and I also think that there should be more companies. One, because we have a big water problem. Two, there's different ways and different, kind of go-to markets for this technology. And for us, we are really focused on the vision of being able to build a sustainable and secure water supply for entire cities. And so our technology is focused on extremely high utility scale water. How do we do that at scale? And then over time continue to decrease the energy needed to produce this water. So that's really how we think about the market.
Okay. And do you partner with solar companies for the rollout, or do you source solar panels yourselves and sell them as part of the solution, or how does the solar aspect work?
Yeah, because we're working with builders, we're prioritizing builders who are open to solar solutions or themselves are already installing solar. We're currently not partnered with any solar companies yet, but if there's any audience member, you're a solar company, I'd love to talk to you and we can figure out a way to partner together to install more solar powered atmospheric water generators.
Great. In terms of scaling up for production, for example, are you planning on ramping up manufacture yourself, or would you consider, or are you planning to license the technology to other manufacturers, or what's the route to scalability?
Yeah, I think technology development and manufacturing is one of our core expertise and DNA. And so as we scale up our business, we definitely want to continue to hold that in-house. So we would think about, building out assembly plants in most of our major markets as we expand, looking at Europe, looking at the Middle East. Right now we're in the US. We definitely, as we expand the business, want to have some aspect of manufacturing within the business for sure.
Okay. And just how low can you go? What I mean by that is, what kind of percentage of relative humidity do you need in the atmosphere for you to be able to pull water out of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there is a limitation there for our approach, our technology. We need at least 25% relative humidity to make meaningful amounts of water. Which means our kind of in our current iteration of the technology, we are not going after extremely arid regions under that number. It just wouldn't quite make sense in the production and the cost to do that. Unless you
And
had infinite solar.
right, right. I guess the flip side of it is, in hot climates, I guess relative humidity rises overnight, which counts against the solar, but it might mean that a home, a community, a city, or whatever might end up making water overnight as the humidity goes up, as opposed to during the day.
Exactly. And that's what our, AI software optimization does. It's actually on top of the actual hardware that we created, we've also built optimization software where we take into account those things, Tom, that you mentioned, like what is the current humidity? What is the current temperature? What is the current energy pricing? What is the current need? All of those things we optimize so that when we're producing water, we're taking that into account. Like, for example, one of the reasons that we're using solar in Hawaii is that grid electricity in Hawaii is extremely, extremely expensive, north of 40
Mm,
cents a kilowatt hour US, versus places in like Dubai or maybe even Mexico City. Actually, there's not that big of a difference between using solar batteries and grid electricity. Of course, it's preferred to use solar, but in terms of absolute pricing, to your everyday customer, not much of a cost difference. It's about the same.
okay.
So those are the things that our software takes account of.
And are they connected devices? Can they look at week ahead weather forecasts and go, okay, well, tomorrow the relative humidity is going to be X%, so I'll do Y.
That's on our roadmap, Tom. You already hit it. That's what we're envisioning for our software. We haven't done that yet, but it's on the roadmap.
Okay, cool, cool. And where to next? I mean, you've mentioned that that's on your roadmap.
Mm.
What else is on your roadmap? Where are you going? Where do you see this going in the next 3, 4, 5 years?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I think it's becoming very apparent to us year after year that the water problem is getting worse. And not only is it getting worse, it's getting worse in many areas, like in the US and even in Europe, in areas that we otherwise wouldn't have thought it would be a problem for us. And so to Aquaria, we already see the writing on the wall that there's going to be more challenges with water, faster and more urgent than we're prepared for. And so during these next 3 to 5 years, our role as a company is to demonstrate to any external party that our technology is stable, that our technology is proven, that we're using this technology to build communities of the future where we are sustainable, where we're secure, where we can showcase that water from the sky is a reality already. And as we continue to do that, bring the cost of our technology lower and lower so that more people can adopt it. And I think that's kind of the flywheel here that will continue to bring us to the broader masses, to more countries, not just more, kind of partners and people in the US, but globally as well. So, that's really how I see the flywheels working, not just for the next 3 to 5 years, but really for the next 10 plus years. Like Tom, have you heard of atmospheric water capture before our podcast? I, I'm not sure.
I mean, I have, but there are WEF videos, for example, World Economic Forum videos, for example, and others of people in South America who are using giant nets to capture humidity out of the air, but it's in a particularly humid environment typically.
Right, right. And it's a video, and I think that's great. We need more videos from any wide-reaching organization. But I think the benchmark to compare that to, though, is there should be as many atmospheric water generators out there as solar panels, and there isn't even close by a far, far margin. So I think that's a good benchmark to think about where things need to be to support enough water.
Cool, cool, cool. Brian, we're coming towards the end of the podcast now. Is there any question I haven't asked that you wish I had, or any aspect of this we haven't touched on that you think it's important for people to think about?
Well, I think so first, I urge our audience to think about how water impacts their lives today. And, even if you live in an area that has very clean and available water, like where we live, and myself, I want to speak to the audience to think about how does water maybe affect your business or other folks that around the world. Because as I've experienced and many of us have experienced already, it just might hit you closer to home than you ever expect to. And it is, we're only one event away from understanding that water problems is way more difficult to solve at this current point than power disruption issues. I was in Japan over New Year's, kind of turn to New Year's, and for a small holiday, and there was an earthquake in the Noto region of Japan, and now it's been I think 5 months. Power was restored maybe 2 months in, but even today, tens of thousands of homes don't have access to running water because there's just not an easy way to fix your water supply. Your energy, you could put up solar panels, get some backup diesel and up. And so, I think that's a very important thing to think about is that we're at that tipping point where a lot of our natural water systems are not actually secure enough to support our, various needs. And so this is something to be top of mind and to be more conversational about it. Yeah, and that's my general encouragement because as we become more educated about the issue, then people will actually think about, invest into, and adopt these new technologies.
Okay, great, great. Super. Brian, if people would like to know more about yourself or any of the things we discussed in the podcast today, where would you have me direct them?
I welcome them to reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. They can put Tom's podcast or, Climate Confident or whatever they like, so I know that you're coming in from the show or something like that. But I'm very active there and I'd love to hear from anyone directly.
Superb. Great. Brian, that's been really interesting. Thanks a million for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me, Tom. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here and hope to chat with you soon again.